I am pissed. Why am I pissed? Let's watch.
A longer video over at the Cool Boys channel where we prove this happens for any FTL message and the bizarre consequences that ensue. Why?
Okay. Also, where's the button? Found the button.
Why going faster than the speed of light leads to time travel paradoxes, explained in less than 3 minutes. To get to this, we first have to quickly build up some understanding of space-time diagrams like this one. Here, the horizontal axis represents one dimension of space and the vertical axis is time. So from the perspective of the Earth, in other words, Earth's reference frame, it isn't moving in space, but simply moves forwards in time, like this.
We're just gonna ignore the fact that that is not how life works.
To make it more interesting, let's add a spaceship moving away from the Earth at 10% the speed of light, c. From Earth's perspective, the ship moves both through space and time like this. The ship's path through space-time is known as its world line, and the angle between its line and that of the reference frame, here the Earth, is the arc tangent of the velocity over c. So here, that gives 80 degrees as depicted. So that rule implies an interesting limit. What happens if v equals c? In other words, something is moving at the speed of light. But the angle now equals 45 degrees, and we call that a null line. This is what light does. Anything steeper than this line will be traveling faster than the speed of light, or FTL.
Like Cherenkov radiation in water, except for we're talking about regular atmosphere.
Perhaps the most extreme case is something that is answerable, which means instantaneous. It takes 0 time.
Okay, for the sake of the diagram, I can say that the Ansible, yeah, let's just assume that that's what it represents in the diagram.
To move a given distance here, and thus it follows a horizontal line. Note how Ansible world lines are always parallel to the sender's space axis, which is here the Earth. We need to know one last rule. Space and time distort in relativity. Not everyone agrees on where these axes live. The new axes can be calculated using so-called Lorentz transformations, but the end result is that the ship's space axis will be mirrored about the null line. This is sometimes known as the reciprocity of axes rule, and hopefully this makes sense because as the ship slows down to 0, these axes will thus return to their same position as that of the Earth. Okay, finally we're ready to see the paradox. First, consider a faster ship, one moving say 70% the speed of light. After a certain amount of time, the Earth sends an FTL message to the ship, in fact an Ansible one. After the message is received by the ship's crew, they spend a bit of time thinking about what to say back, and they finally come up with a reply and send it towards the Earth again using an Ansible transmitter. Now remember our key rule. Ansible messages are parallel to the space axis of the sender, here the ship.
Okay, so the problem... The problem with this is that...
So the reply message has to be parallel to this line. Okay, so coming back to our diagram and sending the reply, it returns back to Earth. But look what happened. The reply was received by Earth before the initial message was even sent. This is a time paradox. Causality has been violated. This also demonstrates why observers can't agree on simultaneity in relativity.
I have talked about how simultaneity works and how the original construct of two simultaneous lightning bolts, and then you got a train moving past the first lightning bolt, or the lightning bolt that is in the front of the train will be seen as first, and the lightning bolt seen in the back of the train will be received second, therefore will be received and understood as second, because you're not compensating for your speed. When you compensate for your speed, then you know when it happened, where it happened, and how it happened simultaneously. You just aren't doing good math. That's how you don't end up with the correct answer. But now, unfortunately, there's a full video about this.
So this was a special case of an Ansible message, but check out our longer video over at the Cool Boys channel where we prove this happens for any FTL message and the bizarre consequences that ensue.
Yeah, that's a lot of nonsense developed by people who aren't using real logic. And they're stuck in their ideas and they're not going out because the whole thing is based off of misunderstandings of a test done on 3 different atomic clocks and is also like a thought experiment that, again, it doesn't matter what the two observers observe, the person doesn't determine the action that took place. It took place and then it was received differently by different observers. It doesn't change what actually happened. You cannot resolve simultaneity in some scenarios if you're not compensating for, I don't know, the speed of the Earth as it goes through the solar system, or as the solar system moves through the galaxy, or the galaxy through the universe. Nothing is stationary. So if you don't compensate for the speeds of things, when you start moving at the speeds of certain high-speed things like light, you're going, like, even just going around an orbit of the Earth at 10,000 meters per second or whatever, is fast enough to be a distortion. If you change from that speed, light will still now take that much longer to travel in your atomic clock. You'll end up with time dilation distortion ideas. And this only happens when the ship is slowing down, which is always, because you're in a free fall, unless you're constantly rocketing yourself to maintain speed, which you're not doing ever, because you're always in a constant free fall. No one's shooting constant rocket bursts. They don't need to. They just need to slow down constantly and then rise back up. The test doesn't compensate for their speed and instead ignores the fact that it takes longer for light to travel in a faster moving ship in a small atomic clock, which is just light bouncing back and forth. Literally, you're moving the target from something that is 1 meter per second to 2 meters per second. You have to understand it'll take twice as long for light to get there. But people don't understand that basic concept, and for some reason think of time dilation. It's nonsense, but this is the kind of stuff that the entire world is sick and stuck thinking. I don't want to react to the entire video because I know I'm just going to be bothered by it all. Relativity, or the idea of a moving observer having different perspective of the simultaneity of events, is irrelevant when you have a bunch of other sensors that can prove the simultaneity of the actual timestamp of any event. If you have enough people if you have enough sensors out there, enough observers out there, you can reconcile any event, position, and velocity of said event if it also is moving along as we all are. It's lazy math, it's lazy science that makes this kind of conclusion possible, and it's disturbing, and I want to put an end to it.